What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, February 5th, 2018, getting into the month here. Reminder, Valentine's Day is coming on up. Got to get something for your significant other here. We have a lot to talk about today. The talking points list is very full. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on into the show here. And obviously, the big story today is the stock market. It has taken a major clubbing. At one point, it was down, the Dow was down over 1,500, really close to 1,600. And it was almost ironic because the real down spike happened just as Donald Trump was making a speech in Ohio about how good he's been for the economy and how the tax cuts are going to work on out. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, has taken credit for the stock market's soaring performance, as presidents before him have, all the way back to Bill Clinton. And the stock market and Trump's reputation just took a major clubbing today. And I'm still looking for the closing number. The worst case, like I said, was almost 1,600. The market just now closed, and it looks like it's about 1,100 down for the end of the day. And I smell panic. I'm looking at the volume on the Dow, and the volume is just through the roof. So obviously there were people who were buying, trying to get the market back on up, the plunge protection team, and a lot of other people selling. I think this is going to continue into tomorrow. I mean, it's just a panic out there. It's a good thing those windows on Wall Street don't open, or it would be raining stockbrokers right now in New York. I was running around the house here screaming, sell our stocks, sell our stocks, sell our stocks. And Claire finally reminded me, we don't actually own any. We don't have that kind of money to play with. But definitely a rough day on the stock market, and everybody is now rattled, and that, of course, will percolate out to sections of the economy that are not directly connected with the stock market. Everybody's going to be hanging on to their money and saying, we don't know what's going to happen. Is this the correction everybody has been talking about? As of right now, the Dow and the NASDAQ are now negative for the year to date. Of course, it's only the start of February. But a lot of people have been saying we're overdue for correction. The market's overvalued. This could be the beginning of that. So plan accordingly. Now, yesterday was the Super Bowl, and the Eagles pulled off an amazing victory, which was all the more amazing because apparently several of their players had come down with the flu. And apparently the Eagles fans just got out of control in Philadelphia, and there were fires, looting, shooting, not exactly what I would consider Spirit Week, which I remember from when I was in high school, but that's what was going on. Apparently Black Lives Matter tried to block, or succeeded in blocking, a light rail train that was carrying ticket holders to the Super Bowl stadium for something like an hour. And the firefighters had to come on in, and the Black Lives Matter chained themselves together. Firefighters came on in with bolt cutters coming apart. Police arresting them to just get out of the way and let these people go and look at their football game. Now, I'm not a big fan of football ever since I got tackled in high school. I was a photographer for the school newspaper covering the football game, and I got tackled and my camera wrecked, and so I've not been a big fan of the sport ever since then. But you didn't behave like this. You know, I miss the days when sports were just about the sports. Football was about football. Baseball was about baseball. The Olympics were about the Olympics, and it wasn't all being politicized, just warped into something to serve somebody's agenda. Apparently liberals are very upset over a commercial that was run on the Super Bowl by WeatherTech, which is the company that makes these very nice liners for your vehicle. And apparently they had an ad about building a wall and saying that their factory is going to be in the USA, and the liberals just went totally bananas on that one. Of course, these days, it's so easy to trigger off a liberal, really. tell them it's a beautiful, sunshiny day. They'll find some reason to complain about it. In any event, I don't think anybody should get too worried about the Super Bowl and its commercials because apparently because of the kneeling situation. The ratings for the Super Bowl broadcast yesterday were the lowest since 2010. Now, the only reason I ever watch Super Bowl anyway is to look at the commercials, and I don't do that all that much anymore now that I'm out of commercial production. But I have in the past had my work on the Super Bowl, which I take an immeasurably, if unjustified, pride in here. But yeah, the ratings were down. People are sending a signal. All right, let's talk about the FISA memo. It is now Monday after the Super Bowl. It is time to put that FISA memo and what it implies back before the eyes of the American people. And Nunes is out there saying the memo that's been released is just phase one. There are other memos coming on out. Apparently, the next one is going to be dealing with the State Department itself. And some of the commentators on this on TV are saying that basically this first memo only represents about 10% of what the committee has found so far. So there is a lot more to come. And like I said, if the GOP are smart, they're going to drag this out all the way to the November elections for maximum political damage. It has now surfaced that Christopher Steele wrote another Trump dossier. And apparently it was full of information given to Steele by a Clinton contact working through the Obama State Department. And apparently, I guess it was discovered or was decided that there wasn't enough laundering of this dossier. It was too easy to track back to the Clinton campaign and the State Department. And that's why they went with manufacturing this other dossier that seemed to come from Russia. But apparently there was this other dossier. It was not part of the papers that were published by BuzzFeed in January of last year. And according to this, Steele wrote this additional memo based on anti-Trump information that originated with a foreign source. In a convoluted scheme outlined in the referral, the foreign source gave the information to an unnamed associate of Hillary and Bill Clinton, who then gave the information to an unnamed official at the State Department, who then gave the information to Steele. They're trying to basically launder it by having so many people handle this thing. They can't go back and actually find the original source. But apparently the dossier that we're all familiar with, the one that came on out in BuzzFeed, was a second attempt at that. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So another story on the same thing. Clinton associate fed Christopher Steele info to put in the dossier. And of course, the Democrats are going ballistic, especially Adam Schiff, who's out there on Twitter saying, well, it's time to just let this memo go away, and Donald Trump's got to focus on fixing immigration and fixing the economy, and we shouldn't be talking about this at all. In fact, Adam Schiff is out there. No, I'm not kidding you. He is saying that if we don't just put this memo away and stop reading it, it could result in an Oklahoma City-style bombing. He literally came on out and said that. And his thinking is that this memo is going to cause Americans to not trust the FBI. And if they see evidence of a neighbor who's buying a lot of fuel oil and fertilizer, they might decide not to call the FBI because of all of the scandal. So that's Adam Schiff's thinking. If we don't just blindly trust the FBI and ignore everything that's in this memo about unauthorized spying, that we're going to have another Oklahoma City type bombing. Boy, that's reaching. That's a reach. It's amazing. Okay, here's the latest development. Just hit the wires earlier this morning. And apparently Grassley has issued a criminal referral on Christopher Steele, specifically saying that he's in violation of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1001, which says that when you are operating on anything within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branches of the government, if you knowingly and willfully falsify, conceal material information, which Steele definitely did, you can be thrown in prison for up to 5 years, and you can be fined for huge amounts of money. And so it looks like Christopher Steele may be looking at some jail time. Meanwhile, Congress is out there saying that it is time for Comey to come back and testify again, because they now know he lied under oath. In September of last year, former FBI Director James Comey lied while under oath to Representative Ratcliffe during testimony to Congress. And basically, Ratcliffe asked Comey, did you make a decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July 2nd? And Comey said it was afterwards. And no, it wasn't. I don't know. The government says it's okay to waterboard people to get information out of them. I think it's time that we start waterboarding some of these people, like Comey and Loretta Lynch, certainly Hillary Clinton. Yeah, in this case, I think waterboarding is an acceptable thing to be doing. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is out there saying that this FISA memo is a devastating blow to Mueller. The dossier is junk. There's no Russia collusion. They haven't found anything, and now the basis for the warrants has been destroyed. The warrants were acquired using fraudulent information, and that renders everything that Mueller claims to have seen or collected over the last year inadmissible in a court of law. It's time to shut this thing down. Meanwhile, of course, the corporate media is out there doing their job of trying to keep the issue confused. And have you noticed? Even though the FISA memo that was issued by the House Intelligence Committee is backed up by all kinds of hard documentation, classified, the corporate media is still out there saying, well, it's an allegation. It's an assertion. Nunes is alleging that the FBI misbehaved. No, the FBI misbehaved. That's been documented. And again, if you want hard evidence, look at all the hard evidence surrounding Hillary Clinton and the Uranium One deal, or Hillary Clinton and massive election fraud in 2016, or Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. Why is the corporate media not looking at that? Because those are serious crimes. Now, the Democrats' latest strategy is they've come up with their own memo. I have a paper. I have a memo here. And they're out there saying that the memo basically refutes everything in the FISA memo. It doesn't actually. It denies it. It says it's all nonsense. It's all, ridiculous. It's a plan to save Donald Trump from the Russian collusion investigation, which, again, has found nothing. And the Democrats are demanding that this memo, that their version of the memo be made public. So apparently Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee are voting today, and they're probably going to send it to Donald Trump's desk, and it will be up to him to decide whether or not it's released. Now, here is the problem. The Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee have not done Donald Trump a favor, because the Democrats are waiting for Trump to say, we're not going to release this, at which point they're going to scream to the media, see, he's got something to cover on up, and all of this nonsense going back and forth. Now, what Trump ought to do, though, is release this Democratic memo with some annotations. Okay, where is the proof? Where is the proof? Where's the proof? Where's the proof? Where's the proof? That's all it's going to take. That's all it's going to take, because the Democrats don't have any proof of Russian collusion. If they'd found anything in the last year, they would have already gone for impeachment. Mueller has nothing. The only indictments he's brought down are for procedural crimes, none of which have anything to do with the actual campaign. He's batting zero And it's costing the American taxpayer millions and millions and millions of dollars. Now, story that came on out from Investment Watch blog is Congress finally pushing back against the security agency's overreach. And if they're not, they need to be. Because everybody in Congress, if they're not already compromised and blackmailed, they have to realize that with all of this unauthorized snooping, this violation of the Fourth Amendment going on, it's only a matter of time before whatever dirt they've got in their life will be in the hands of the spooks and be used to control them. Because remember, what the Nunes memo is talking about, the FISA memo is talking about, was an effort to manufacture the appearance of legality for surveillance. But it doesn't say this is the only surveillance that's been going on. We now know that intelligence agencies started spying on Donald Trump the moment he won the GOP nomination, and I'd be willing to wager a nickel. It probably was going on before that. The spies have completely walked away from the Bill of Rights, and anybody who's of any interest to them, they're spying on. Snowden said that. Now, down in Texas, Representative Gohmert is calling for Comey, McCabe, and Orr to be thrown in prison for defrauding the FISA court with that fake Trump Russian dossier. And he's absolutely right, because again, this falls under the heading of Title 18, Section 1001. Knowingly presenting false information in a proceeding before the, well, in this case, the judicial branch. 5 years in prison. So, a lot of spying going on. All right, let's take a look at the war zones, and there's a lot going on that we need to be concerned about. As you probably are aware, back on February 3rd, 2 days ago, the Syrian militants shot down a Russian Sukhoi 25 warplane using a man-pad over the village of Khan al-Sabil, southwest of the city of Sarakib in the province of Idlib. Now, this is a major, major escalation. First of all, none of the U.S.-supported terrorists have had man-pads up to this time. So where did they come from? Now, the U.S. is already officially denying that they had anything to do with this whatsoever. But man-pads are rather sophisticated pieces of kit, and only a few countries make them. Russia has already said their intelligence has confirmed that the man-pad that shot down the Sukhoi 25 was brought into Syria from an adjoining country. And I think we can all agree that's a very narrow list of who that's going to be. So anyway, the Sukhoi pilot ejected, then was killed on the ground fighting with the militants. He did not allow himself to be taken alive, which shows you how tough those Russians can be. But yeah, somebody somewhere is still giving the Syrians terrorists weapons. We're going to take a phone call. Robert in Phoenix. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
I was just thinking, the independent media narrative on Oklahoma City was that they took all the evidence from Waco and put it in the Oklahoma City FBI headquarters there in the Federal Memorial Building.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So if we didn't trust the FBI and they put all that evidence into the Federal Murder Building in Oklahoma City, and they blew it up so that we couldn't find that evidence, maybe he's saying that they're going to get all this evidence together in one spot and blow that spot up.
Well, he might be. Might be. The Murrah building was actually blown up to push the domestic terrorist agenda, but as long as you're going to blow up a building, anything that you need to disappear, you just put it in there. And it wasn't just the Waco evidence. Apparently, there was a lot of documentation about things that were making our military veterans sick. that had to be gotten rid of, and that was also in the building. Anyway, Robert, thanks. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go to the phones for more phone calls, first of all, if you'd like to help keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, and folks, we really do need your support right now. Things are very, very tight and difficult for Republic Broadcasting. We need your help, or we're not going to be here. That's just the hard reality we're all having to deal with right now. If you want to send in a check or money order, the postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone on in and pledge to become a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And of course, we're grateful for everything that you do for Republic Broadcasting and also for whatreallyhappened.com. Now, before we go to the phones here, I'm looking at the Dow Jones futures. These are, everybody's now in pre-market trading ahead of tomorrow's open. The numbers are not looking good. The Dow is looking to be down by 1,400, NASDAQ down by 344, S&P down by 148. So, judging by the futures trades, it's going to be another bloodbath on Wall Street tomorrow. Okay, let's start taking phone calls. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, thanks. It's starting to get real interesting here with the stock market. And I was watching the ABC news Saturday night, which comes on, I think, at 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. And they were talking about the drop in the stock market, or the Dow Jones on Friday. This is Saturday night. I remember having seen it. I don't normally follow it that closely when it starts dropping until it starts dropping. And I remember it was like 664 or 665 or something like that. But on ABC News Saturday night, they put it up on the screen in big numbers. And it took up about 85% of the screen. And they just put it up there. It said 666, that it had dropped 666 points. Mm-hmm. And they flashed, big numbers, 666 up on the screen. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, it was obviously the beginning of the downturn. If you look at the stock market charts, for going back for like the last week, it basically started dropping on February 1st, and it's just been continuing down, and the downturn is accelerating. And very obviously, late in the day today, the plunge protection team was trying to shove it back up. But just looking at the volume of trades going on the Dow, people were selling faster than the PPT could buy.
Hey, Mike, what percentage of people that are even in the stock market and follow it do you think are even aware that there is an entity such as the plunge protection team? Because every time I've ever brought it up with all these experts who have lots of money in it, they act like I'm making it up.
Well, it's not something that is widely known. In fact, for a while, it wasn't known at all. And I think it was, again, back about the time that John F. Kennedy Jr. Was assassinated. There was a story that did come out in Time magazine. It was a cover story about the president's special team on the markets, which is its official name. But it was called the Plunge Protection Team, and it had become an issue because word about it had gotten out on Wall Street, and everybody who was out there short selling was saying that this was cheating, which it is, because every time the Plunge Protection Team comes on in with all their instantly created money to shove the markets back up, anybody who's been short selling a stock based on legitimate market indicators got crushed. And so there was a big stink about it. But again, they're still playing these games. They're rigging the stock market just like they lie about the unemployment numbers. And anybody who's out there on the stock market thinking it's an honest system, you're going to get creamed.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I'm really enjoying this, and I hope it continues, because these people that are invested in it and have faith in it, they're part of our problem. I mean, I call them the unreachables. You can't reach them. And then, sometimes I call them the dung beetles, because they just keep eating it. And that seems to be their whole purpose for living, is to eat the dung. And I just don't buy that 666 was happenstance. That had to have been either them just having a joke, on the expense of the masses, or something. Because I mean, I don't buy that it just happened.
I don't think anybody was laughing. I don't think anybody was laughing when the numbers are turning down like that. And of course, I call these people the money junkies. And there is a certain part of me that loves to see people who became rich by very nefarious means all of a sudden be made poor. But we need to recognize that when the stock market as a whole goes down, it's going to harm retailers. They took a clubbing today, and that means they're going to be laying off people. And so, unfortunately, the pain to the stock market tends to get dumped on ordinary people rather than those whose manipulations wrecked the market in the first place. Anyway, Frank, we're going to let you go. We're going to take another break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
The stock market's not, though.
Well, I don't own any stock.
Me either. You know what, Mike? I'm going to go into my tirade today because as your fellow half-baked Americans was watching the Super Bowl, having riots in the street in Philadelphia after their team won and looting, a Russian pilot killed himself to keep him from getting captured by the U.S. jihadi terrorists. And if you think anybody knows that, otherwise, between us and your listeners, nobody. What a half-baked American culture we got, Mike. Decadent, Roman pieces of garbage, these people in Philadelphia having these riots over a football team that has no significance to them. You know, I don't understand what the mentality has gone into this country, Mike.
It's the same thing that Rome did. They got everybody worked up about the gladiatorial combats at the Colosseum in order to basically get the people to spend their energy, so they didn't have the energy to really take a close look at what the emperors were doing in their private moments, people like Nero and Caligula. But again, getting on back to that Sukhoi pilot in Syria, did you hear what Bashar al-Assad said about him?
No, I didn't.
He says, if this guy was willing to fight this hard for Syria, imagine how hard they're going to fight for their own country, Russia. And Assad was sending a warning to the U.S. government, which they, as usual, will ignore.
Yeah, and if you saw the Russian response, they sent them a couple cruise missiles.
More than a couple. They pounded the place.
Yeah, it's amazing though, Mike. Like, just nobody knows anything what's really going on. They're living in, like I see the scene of the people in Philadelphia look like Dawn of the Dead, like all scrambling to the mall to get a couple last like human hamburger meat specimens. Like it's just amazing how stupid. Well, I mean, it's sad though, Mike. And look at the stock market today, down this much. Everything's supposed to be great. Like the unemployment rate low, bull. Latino and black unemployment rate low, bull. It's a rigged game. This is like gambling in a casino. When are people going to realize that? It's like playing Red Dog or roulette. You're going to lose eventually.
Absolutely.
If anybody's in the stock market, Mike, you got to get out in the next 2 days, Mike. Like, this is bad news, what's going on in the last week.
I think people are getting out.
But if everything's great, Mike, why would it drop all of a sudden? Like, what's going on? What's happened? What's changed?
Well,
I don't know. I can't figure it out.
They're trying to blame it now on concern over Trump's tax cuts. Of course, the corporate media is going to spin that to be a negative on Trump. Apparently, there seem to be indicators inflation may be going on up. Yellen supposedly is going to be raising rates a little tiny bit. But our market has been propped up with all these little devices of near zero interest rates from the Federal Reserve, and it's very fragile, and it's very overvalued, and it's not going to take much to bring it all crashing down. And again, I'm looking at those futures for tomorrow. Let me hit refresh on this thing. And yeah, basically, they're predicting the Dow is going to drop another 1,500 tomorrow.
Yeah, do people realize we used to have a savings rate in this country, albeit a small amount, but is this what we come down to? We have to make extra money by investing in a rigged market? You can lose everything.
You can, especially if you're borrowing to invest. That's what happened in 1929. Remember, I think it was just in the last year, trying to get more liquidity out there in the economy, and they started attacking people with savings accounts, saying that people with savings accounts are being selfish. They're just hoarding their money instead of putting it to good use in circulation. And it's directly the opposite. When I was a kid, everybody was told, have a savings account, have something set aside for emergencies to deal with a crisis. But what really concerns me about our market right now is both an awareness of how overvalued it is and how many of these stocks have been bought on margin, which means on credit. And that was what really turned the crash of 29 into that depression of the 1930s. And it looks like we're going to go through it again.
But look at also Bitcoin, Mike. I don't have a problem with digital currency, even though you can't hold it, you don't own it. It's not like gold or silver where you actually have to, you could own a physical silver or gold coin or bar. On digital currency, you don't own anything. But I mean, that's a rigged market too, because people are investing they're mortgaging their house on. I mean, you got to realize people
can't do that. Yep. I mean, if you shouldn't be investing anywhere, whether it's stocks or virtual currencies, unless you have what's called risk capital, which means money you can afford to lose and not have your life destroyed. Now, obviously, being able to buy gold and silver coins, it doesn't take a huge amount, and you can do a little bit over time, and you're probably going to get a better return than a regular savings account at the bank. Plus, you don't have to worry about the bank simply grabbing your savings account when they get into trouble, which they are now legally allowed to do. But to try and do a huge investment, no, you don't put it on your credit card. And by the way, a lot of banks are now refusing to allow people to buy Bitcoins on their credit cards, and I actually agree with that. Because I'm smelling tulips all over the place with the virtual currencies. And by the way, the Federal Reserve note is a virtual currency. Most of the U.S. dollars in circulation exist only in computers. There isn't even an ink and paper note to go with them. But again, you shouldn't be buying stocks on credit, because especially anything with a derivative. Because when it goes south, it will wreck you.
Mike, after you get off the phone with me, explain what the tulip means, because a lot of people don't really know what that means. And Mike, one more thing about people need to at least, we talked about prepping. I hate to say this, but I'm not selfish person. But I mean, if something happens, the stuff. If you spend a long time prepping yourself and getting food or water or whatever to protect yourself ready, I mean, I have a hard time giving it away to somebody who needs it. I don't know. I just do, Mike. Especially ever people have the choice to learn what's going on and they don't. They're rather busy watching Kim Kardashian or Monday Night Football. I have to be selfish on that point, Mike. I'd say F them at this point.
I agree with you. First of all, I don't watch football, and I don't watch Kim Kardashian. If I have the time to watch any sports at all, it tends to be fencing and archery, which were the teams that I was on when I was in college. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go, and I'm going to clarify the issue of the tulips before we take this next call from Steve Elkins. Just briefly, there was this investment mania that took place in Holland between 1634 and 1637, where people were buying and selling these tulip bulbs for the flowers, and it just went completely out of control from speculation. At one point, at the peak of it, a single tulip bulb was worth an entire house. And of course, when it all crashed, the tulip bulbs were worth basically the same as an onion. So the whole phenomenon was called tulip mania. It got completely out of control. You can do a web search on it. There's all kinds of articles about it. In the second of the Wall Street movies, there's even a reference to tulip mania. And it has been written about as just what can happen when people just get overconfident in investing in a commodity. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve Elkins, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got to laugh at the Democrats. They want to take credit for the rising stock markets, the bull market, and saying it's Obama politics now. It's coming into play as why the markets look so good. But now we're in a bear market here, and the prices are going down. There's a big sell-off. Profits were already made, and people are getting out and selling off everything. They're going to be buying back in at the low again and going back up, hopefully for another bull market in the future. But it's funny that they're taking credit for the high on the bull, but they don't want to claim it now. They want to pass the buck that Donald Trump's policies now are causing all this volatility in the markets. And I agree with you. And a while back you said that the volatility in the markets became even more volatile when there became day trading was a huge part of this whole volatility in the markets. Mm-hmm. I agree that that caused a lot more problems, and a lot of people got squeezed out, lost a lot of money on this day trading. But I still believe that day trading brings more volatility to the markets than just regular trading.
It definitely does that, but you need to understand from the speculator's point of view, they like a volatile market because it gives them more highs and lows to ride the straddle on and make more money. And that's not healthy for the market. The stock market originally was supposed to be investing your money in livestock at the beginning of the year. So that some ranchers and farmers could have more livestock to work with than they themselves could afford. And then you basically wait patiently throughout the year until the livestock was sold, and the farmer would then share whatever money he made with the investors in a proportion. That's where the name the stock market comes from. But today, of course, with all the high-frequency trading and everything, it has been turned into basically a giant open-air casino. And people who are buying and selling stocks, for the most part, they're really not even interested in the underlying companies. They just want the action. They get hooked on the adrenaline. And there was this wonderful movie, Inside Job. It came out just after the 2008 meltdown. It was a foreign-made documentary. It began in Iceland, then went to New York. And one of the things that was in this documentary, which, by the way, won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Documentary, they showed how scientists had gone to Wall Street and they wired up some of these traders to brain scan machines and just watched them while they were working. And they discovered that every time a trader made a big score, a lot of zeros, the part of his brain that would light up was exactly the same part of the brain that lights up when you do cocaine. So it really, literally is an addictive process. They really are money junkies. And it's unfortunately, the only addiction which is not recognized and treated as such, despite the obvious devastation it brings to everybody around these particular addicts.
Yeah. Well, that would have been the hypothalamus. That's the addiction center in the brain.
Yes.
I did see that movie. That was an excellent movie. Steve Carell was in that. That was an excellent movie. A lot of that foreclosure and the betting on the foreclosures was down here in South Florida.
Yes.
But one other thing I did find, an observation I made, I used to watch this and follow it quite closely, was the Baltic Dry Index, and I've talked to you about the Baltic Dry Index. I used to go to a site called dryships.com, click on a little tab there. It says Daily Market Watch, and it would give you a daily Baltic Dry Index. They no longer carry the Baltic Dry Index local to tell you every day on the day. It is no longer listed. They've taken it off the website. I had to go to Bloomberg to find it now on a Bloomberg financial site, but dryships.com decided not to post the daily Baltic Dry Index, which I found very, very strange because I followed that and I was trending it to our markets, and I can actually tell you at the plunge protection, when they actually started dumping the money in, was about 2 hours before market close, hoping that it would stay inflated, the bubble would stay inflated, and if it leaked out a little bit, it still stayed in positive territory. It was I watched this for weeks and weeks and trended it. Watch, you can see it right here on the graph. And but the Baltic Dry Index no longer can be found on dryships.com. You have to go to a Bloomberg financial site.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it's basically down to 1,095 off a high of looks like close to 1,400 back on the 9th of January. So yeah, that's trending down very solidly, which you would actually expect in the post-holiday shopping season, because at this point, with the poor performance of the holiday shopping season, manufacturers are cutting back on orders They're cutting back on manufacturing. The retail stores aren't ordering because they still have inventory that they're trying to get rid of it before the inventory tax hits them. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a mess out there.
Yeah. Have you actually seen the numbers for the retail year for Christmas? Because I saw they said $80 billion was going back to the store in refunds for people who didn't want the merchandise. So around $80 billion. And then Amazon was expecting 1.4 million returns also.
Yeah.
So taking that $80 billion out and giving it back to the store for the refunds, that took a big chunk out of their retail year. I never did hear any final numbers. Did you?
No, I haven't either, but I do note that some of the heaviest losers in today's market sell-off were these large retailers. So somebody somewhere knows. And you don't need an expert to tell you. Just walking around the mall and just looking. People were looking through those windows. They were gazing avariciously on all these wonderful things there. Very few of them carrying bags.
Right. Yeah. I got it. Hey, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the war zones here. And by the way, the Dow futures for tomorrow are still sinking. They're still going down. It's down more than 1,500 last time I looked. Turkey is now warning U.S. troops in northern Syria that are merged with the Kurdish forces may be targeted by Turkey's armed forces. This is the second time Erdogan has issued this warning, and the U.S. response is, we are not leaving Syria, we're keeping our people here. And it's a very awkward situation because Turkey doesn't want the U.S. forces there, Russia doesn't want the U.S. forces there, the Syrian government doesn't want the U.S. forces there. Those kids, those 2,000 troops, could find themselves literally surrounded on three sides by three different armies that want to get rid of them. So it's a madhouse over there. And every day it's getting just a little bit crazier. Now, there's an international arms watchdog, the Conflict Armament Research Group. It's funded by the European Union, and it has been studying the question of where are all the weapons coming from that are being used by these Syrian militant groups. And to nobody's surprise, they found out that most of the ISIS weaponry was purchased from Eastern European stockpiles by the United States and Saudi Arabia, and then smuggled in to the opposition forces in Syria and Iraq. Now, those of you who read whatreallyhappened.com, those of you who listen to Republic Broadcasting, this is not going to come as a surprise, because we knew this was going on under then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And now, of course, Russia is obviously very concerned about the fact that man-pads are now being used in Syria, which means Russia's going to have to fly their air missions much, much higher, or they're going to have to make a point of having anti-man-pad defenses. More about that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I want to go on back to the stock market today. Obviously a big story. I'm looking at the futures for tomorrow. They're not looking good. And I'm now looking at markets in other countries. They're taking major hit. This is a global sell-off, and apparently, according to at least this article in The Guardian, what's driving the sell-off is fears of interest rate rises in the U.S. to supposedly tame inflation, and they're making the markets nervous. Well, we understand that on Wall Street, in order for the market to be made to look good, brokers have been able to go to the Federal Reserve and borrow a huge amount of money at almost zero interest rates, and then they'll put it in the stock market. The presence of that huge buy drives the market up. It's kind of a pump and dump. Then they'll sell their stocks. They'll pay the money back to the Federal Reserve with that microscopic bit of interest, and whatever's left over, they get to put in their pocket. But that all breaks down if the Federal Reserve increases interest rates and erodes that margin. These pump and dumpers are just going to quit doing that. And that may be a component of what is starting to happen here. Obviously, we're going to be keeping an eye on this. If you are in the stock market right now, you might want to seriously think your position, talk to your broker. I don't want to be part of starting a panic, but I'll be very honest. If I actually had any stock myself right now, I would be thinking strongly about liquidating it and putting it, again, into precious metals, gold and silver. Getting on back to the war zones, there's a lot of tough talk going on between Israel and Lebanon, just as these American forces are getting set for what we're told is a 5-day exercise. But apparently over in Israel, Minister Katz, the transportation minister, is saying Lebanon will be blown back to the Stone Age. That's pretty tough talk. And apparently the education minister, Benefit, says if missiles are fired from Lebanon, Nasrallah will become Lebanon's destroyer. So Israel is just over there doing what Israel does, which is to cause trouble for everybody else. Apparently Israeli authorities have knocked down a portion of a Bedouin school in the West Bank. Now, these schools were funded by the European Union, and they were part of a school for Bedouins in the occupied West Bank, but Israel said they were built illegally. And apparently Israeli authorities are saying these demolitions are carrying out court rulings against unauthorized building by Palestinians. Basically what it comes down to is Israel has this attitude that any building in the West Bank that is not built by and for Israeli-only settlers is considered illegal and treated as such by the Israeli government. Now, I can imagine those people up at the European Union who wrote the check for all of this are going to be a little bit less than happy, and they may come on out and complain about it, at which point we can expect Israel to say, oh, you're a bunch of anti-Semites, you're Jew haters, you want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the oven. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Fox News is now reporting on the global stock markets. Primarily, they're focusing on the Asian markets, which are going to start opening up here in the very near future. And yeah, they're down as well. I was looking at markets all over the globe. This is a global sell-off. This is not just a problem here in the United States of America. And I think that illustrates one of my concerns with globalism. With everything connected to everything across the globe, one disaster anywhere can bring the entire system crashing down. And I think this is going to illustrate that. All right, let's talk some more about the economy. Apparently, cryptocurrencies are also taking a clubbing. Part of it is that India has said they're going to eliminate cryptocurrencies use in their country. China is going to ban all foreign platforms. If there's going to be Chinese cryptocurrency, it will run inside China on Chinese servers. And so there's a little bit of a Bitcoin bloodbath, and it has taken a major drop as well. Apparently, Bitcoin has dropped below $8,000 again. That basically maps to over $60 billion wiped off the value of cryptocurrencies from its high point. And again, that's why I smell tulips. What can I tell you? Now, Lloyd's Banking Group has joined the list of banks that are banning Bitcoin buys on credit cards. And there's a concern, obviously, of a credit risk surrounding cryptocurrency's rapid decline. And apparently the ban applies to Lloyd's Bank, Bank of Scotland, Halifax, and MBNA. And I understand a lot of people are already looking at the low markets and saying, well, maybe this is time to buy on in. And maybe it is. Got those kind of nerves. But don't borrow to do it, because that is what really caused all the damage back in 1929. Democrats are out there vowing to repeal Trump's tax cuts. And unfortunately, the declining market may actually give them the ammunition. Because as that caller indicated, they're going to blame Donald Trump for this. The Democrats were always taking credit when the economy is going up. When it goes down, they're going to blame the opposition. That's how politicians work. If it's something good, I did it. If it's something bad, oh, the opposition person over there, they screwed it up. But apparently Nancy Pelosi is out there saying it's time to repeal the bill because, by golly, we Democrats, we need that money. It's against our principles to let you have any more money than that which you need to live on. Now, speaking of cryptocurrency, as you know, down in Venezuela, they're trying to break free of their dependence on Western private central banking. And they're getting ready to issue a cryptocurrency, a petro cryptocurrency, backed up by Venezuela's undeveloped oil resources. It's actually going to have a commodity base for it. And now, because of this, the United States is saying they're going to cut off Venezuelan oil imports. They want the cryptocurrencies to go away. They want Venezuela to remain enslaved to the private central banks. Now, Venezuela may be able to evade that because apparently they've worked out a deal with China in which China is going to loan them cash to get Venezuela back on their feet, and Venezuela is going to repay the loan directly in oil. So we'll see what happens with that. Over in Great Britain and Europe, basically the European Union is now threatening to veto the Brexit if Theresa May fails to protect citizens' rights. Now, in Brussels' mind, the citizens' rights include a continued right to simply travel freely from any place in the EU to Great Britain. They're saying Britain is not allowed to close their borders from EU citizens or more refugees. And of course, it's that refugee issue that really powered the Brexit deal to begin with. What the European Union is trying to do is make Great Britain's exit an exit in name only. They still want the British money. They still want Britain tangled up with Brussels trade restrictions, and they still want the open borders. And if Theresa May doesn't start doing the job, I think she's going to lose her next election. Because the British people are getting tired of all this. They want a hard Brexit. They want gates put up on that tunnel and just say, we're off. We're cutting the wires. We're gone. No more negotiations. Theresa May has already given away way too much in the eyes of the people of Britain in terms of future payments, the divorce payments. The EU Charter gives those states the right to leave anytime they want. What's the European Union going to do? Invade? Now, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Pardon me. The Immigrations and Custom Enforcement is now starting their raids in Northern California. Remember, there's this big stink. California is supposed to be a sanctuary state. ICE is coming on in. California has literally threatened anybody who helps Immigration and Customs Enforcement will be subject to prosecution by the state of California. And this puts people in a very awkward position because if they interfere and don't assist ICE, they could be federally charged under Title VIII. But those liberals, they want those illegal immigrants. They're just absolutely convinced that that will be the ticket to winning the November election and then in 2020. And again, what we need before that November election is a nationwide voter ID law. It is not racist to demand voter ID because illegal isn't a race. Now, back in 2016, this is the last year for which they have accurate figures, immigrants, legal and otherwise, sent an estimated $140 billion from here in the United States back to their home countries and foreign relatives. There's a lot of immigrants in this country, both legal and illegal, and especially the illegal ones are working on cash deals. They don't pay taxes. There's no record, and they're just putting that money in, wiring it back to their home countries. And there's the problem. This is a loss of domestic spending. The money isn't staying in this country. It's not powering our economy. It is simply bleeding on out to these other countries. And at some point, I'm sure it will circulate back on the national level, but it's not helping our local communities to have this money continuously sucked out. Now, these calculations are all coming from the World Bank. Article out of Breitbart. Over in Great Britain, rough sleeping reaches record levels while the refugees remain welcome. And this, to me, is just a horrible, horrible story. And we've seen it here in the United States. Apparently, 5,000 people, including veterans, are sleeping rough last year. Sleeping rough is the British phrase for living homeless. Sleeping under bridges, sleeping in doorways, whatever you can do. But local authorities rolled out the red carpet for the refugees. Apparently, some authorities literally counted 4,751 people sleeping outside in a single night in autumn. That's a 15% increase over 2016. And of course, they're seeing the same thing in 2017 and in 2018. And meanwhile, the tax money is going for support of these asylum seekers. So Great Britain, as it is here in the United States of America, the priority are the refugees and the illegal immigrants, not their own people. Here's an interesting little story, and this is from the city of Independence in Kansas. And basically what it is there was a guy, actually somebody wrote in to correct and say it's actually happened in Independence, Missouri, because they're familiar with where it happened. They live near the thing. But anyway, here's the situation. A guy named Mike Becker was at home, and he got a phone call from the local Dollar General, which is a bargain basement store, from his wife, saying that she and their 4-year-old daughter and a bunch of other customers in the store were being threatened by a man with a gun. So he grabs his gun, his legally owned gun, and he goes down to the dollar store and basically puts himself between this man and the door, saying, we're not going to let that guy get in. And apparently the cops showed up and they shot the father, trying to protect his wife and daughter. The cops just showed up, opened fire, and hit the wrong guy, hit the hero. This Mike Becker is a hero, and the police shot him. Hey, because that's what we do. We're the police. Getting on back to Adam Schiff, I hope he keeps talking. I hope the media gives him a lot of coverage and he keeps flapping his gums because he keeps saying more and more absurd things. Now, this is the guy earlier in the show we were talking about. He's saying that if we don't just shred the FISA memo and blindly trust the FBI, that we're going to have another Oklahoma City-style bombing. Apparently, one of the other things that he did is he's now saying that Russia is behind an advertising campaign to support the Second Amendment, because the Russians want Americans to kill each other off. Gun ownership is now a Russian plot. Adam Schiff makes a good case, I think, for mandatory daily drug testing of all elected officials. Now, speaking of school shooting, there was one that happened a while back in Los Angeles. And there were 4 students who were injured, and they were shot by this 12-year-old girl. And now the police are saying it actually wasn't intentional. The girl did not intend to hurt anybody, but apparently some other student had brought this gun to school, and the girl picked it up and just thought it was a toy, like an airsoft gun. And she pulled the trigger, discharged the weapon, and the bullet apparently, because everybody was crowded around looking at the gun, the bullet hit 4 people. Now, this gets back to something that I've been saying for a very, very long time. Instead of trying to terrorize children about firearms, we need to teach them all firearm safety. 12-year-olds know how to use weapons. When I was growing up, your 12th birthday is where you got your first gun and your first lecture on firearm safety, which was the second religion in the town that I grew up in. And the first time you mishandled a weapon, you would get a trip to the woodshed, would have you eating your dinner, standing up for at least a week. Had this 12-year-old girl been given a gun safety course, she would have known to keep the barrel pointed away from people and clear the firearm before anything else. But because the gun grabbers think it's wrong to teach gun safety to children, we now have these 4 injured kids who may carry those scars for the rest of their lives. Even if you don't want to have a gun in the house, even if you don't want your kid to have a gun, still teach them gun safety, because guns get lost a lot. I remember when I was in Los Angeles, people who would rob the convenience stores and they'd hear the cops coming, they'd just drop the gun in somebody's front yard so that they wouldn't be caught with it. Remember how they found the gun used in the Tate LaBianca murders? It had just been thrown into a hedge. Guns are out there. Loaded guns are out there. Teach your kids gun safety, because that is a better idea than having kids scared of guns or curious about guns. This may have been the first time this 12-year-old actually handled a firearm. Teach gun safety, teach gun safety, teach gun safety. Everybody should know the basic operating principles of firearms, and most importantly, how do you safe the weapon? The instant it goes into your hands, what do you do to make sure the weapon is not going to shoot somebody that you do not intend to shoot? It doesn't take that long. Why is it such a big issue with these gun grabbers? Now, getting into the world of political correctness, and there's a lot of this out here. Apparently in Wayland, Massachusetts, at the Wayland High School, they were going to show a movie made by the Disney studio called Cool Running. And it's about this very famous Olympic bobsled team from Jamaica that won the bobsled Olympics in 1988. And it was considered this amazing come-from-behind story because there actually isn't a lot of snow to practice on down in Jamaica. And these people are the heroes. But somebody came on in and said, you know, this movie is racially insensitive. And so now the school has canceled the movie. And apparently the complaint that the movie was racially insensitive came from a single student. Now, if I'd been the teacher or the principal of that school, my response would have been, okay, if you think it's racially insensitive, you can spend the same amount of time in the library doing homework. You don't have to watch the movie. But we have reached a place in our deteriorating society where if anybody, anywhere, is offended by anything, it's supposed to be taken away from the rest of us. Now, I've seen this movie. It's a very good movie. It's a real-life story about how these guys just said, we're going to be a bobsled team. And they went out and they did it. What is wrong with that? Actually, nothing. We have another one of those cases where a lesbian couple has gone into a bakery demanding a wedding cake, and the bakery is owned by somebody with strong religious beliefs, and there's been an altercation and resulting in a lawsuit. So apparently, this is up in Kern County, Christian baker, and basically the state of California is taking the owner of the bakery, Kathy Miller, to court, demanding that she either design wedding cakes promoting messages she disagrees with or shut down her bakery completely. And we've heard these cases before. Now, here is the problem. When the lesbian couple came into Kathy's bake shop and said, we want this, and Kathy said, I'm not comfortable with the message, but I know a baker who will do this for you. And the lesbian couple refused to go to this other baker who would make their cake because the attitude is, we're going to force you to do this message on our cake simply because you don't want to do it. This is part of that militant, you will accept us as normal attitude, which we talked about last week, that is actually building more resentment towards the LGBTQ community. Now, let me put this issue in another context. WhatReallyHappened.com is supported in part by advertisers, one of which, major one, we just lost. And I'm constantly approached by people who want to advertise certain products and services I find objectionable, such as porn sites or online gambling. And I will refuse those clients, who then simply move on to find more agreeable webmasters to do business with. That's how it's supposed to work. Now imagine some porn company or online gambling operator going to court and claiming that I am restricting their First Amendment right by refusing to run their porn and gambling ads and getting the court to agree to force me to run the ads. You can see how silly this is all getting. How utterly ridiculous. Now, everybody has a right, and you'll even see signs in front of some stores. We reserve the right to refuse service to certain customers. And again, the appropriate, polite, respectful thing would have been for the lesbians to say, okay, we understand and respect your point of view, and thank you for the referral to the baker who will make our cake. That would have been the mature thing to do. Instead of this getting in your face, you will do what we want no matter how you feel about it. And as I said before, it's just building more resentment. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is now back to the FISA memo. And apparently the House Intelligence Committee is meeting to vote on whether to release the Democratic rebuttal. And already you've got the heavyweights of the Democratic Party are out there saying Trump must release this. We'll know he's hiding something if he doesn't release this. And there's going to be nothing in this memo except the same baseless accusations they've been hurling at Trump all year long, that he's colluded with Russia, that he's trying to shut down the Mueller investigation. So there really isn't going to be anything new. But what they're trying to do is level the playing field. They're putting out their memo so that Democrats will have something to cling to in their desperate denial of just how corrupt the Democratic Party has become. Meanwhile, I'm looking at some of the headlines of the financial press responding to today's downturn. JP Morgan is out there saying, this isn't the start of a major downturn. Everybody relax. Apparently one of the major hedge funds is out there saying, stocks may tumble 10%, but hang in there. And another one, don't panic, this slump is just a blip. Boy, I think they're really worried about people just deciding they maybe get their money out while they still can. And again, looking at the futures for tomorrow's stock market, it's going to be another rough day. It's going to be another rough day. So getting on back to political correctness, over in Staten Island, New York, they have this elementary school. And like so many schools across America, and this was going on when I was a kid, schools have a once-a-year event called the father-daughter dance, where fathers will take their daughters and they'll just have a dance. And I guess this is where daddy gets to teach basic etiquette and a few simple dance steps to get them into that. But apparently this school, in order to conform with new gender guidelines, has canceled the dance completely. Because obviously if it's saying fathers, well, that's a man. And if it's saying daughter, well, that's a woman. They're imposing these gender labels on what we're doing. And so, yeah, they just shut it down. Now, over in Great Britain, there was this art gallery in Manchester, and they had a painting up there, pre-Raphael, and it's called Hylas and the Nymphs. And apparently somebody came on in and said that this painting is offensive to women. Now, the painting basically depicts the Argonaut warrior Hylas, who's being lured into the water by these naked, beckoning nymphs. while he was trying to get water in a pitcher. It's part of the story of the Golden Fleece. And so the painting, there's nothing pornographic about it. By now, you've probably seen the painting several times. But apparently, one woman who went on in there and said, it's offensive to women because it's portraying these women as femme fatales and as objects of lust for men. Yeah, that's what the story is. They use their wiles and ways to lure this guy, and then they drown him. That is what happened. So because of this one complaint. And by the way, have you ever noticed that the women who are screaming the loudest about not having naked women on display are women that you wouldn't want to see with their clothes off in the first place? Just a little something to keep in mind. So this gallery took the painting down, and they hung up a sign saying, we've removed the painting to stimulate a discussion of how women are being portrayed. And they got a discussion, only not the one they wanted. The criticism was loud and widespread, and basically the gallery has now restored this painting to the wall. And maybe they've learned a lesson about letting one person who feels offended take something away from everybody else, like art and culture. And again, if this woman is offended at looking at paintings of naked women, what is she doing there? Because if you go into an art museum or an art gallery, you're going to see pictures of naked people. It's kind of automatic. It's kind of like that lesbian couple. They're going to go where they already know they're not wanted, and they're going to be offended, and they're going to complain, and they're going to whine, and they're going to cry, and it's just completely over the top. Now I'll give you another one. Over at the Veterans Administration, their memo is to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan. And feminists have come on in and say, you've got to take that motto down. It's sexist. It implies that men fight the battles and that the women and the children stay at home, which is still the overwhelming reality. And the VA has said no, because it's actually a quote from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. You don't want to read the motto? You don't have to. Just shut the heck up about what the rest of us are going to be thinking and feeling about all of this. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, Fox News is talking about Trey Gowdy is retiring from Congress at the end of his term. Somebody actually tried to start a rumor that Trey Gowdy is getting ready to join the Mueller investigation, which I have been completely unable to corroborate. And I imagine right now the Democrats and the FBI and the Department of Justice are in an absolute blind panic, and they're just going to try anything they can think of to just blunt the issue, to blur it, make it go away here. Let's talk about computers and computer technology right now, because there's a lot going on about that. Apparently, Facebook has announced a new round of censorship targeting anti-globalist posts. We already know they're targeting conservative opinion, and now they're targeting any articles or posts that question the wisdom and prudence of a one-world government and a new world order. So they're doing that. But I think Facebook is about to learn a very ugly lesson about censorship and about the First Amendment, because apparently since they've started tweaking their news feed and imposing censorship, Facebook usage is falling here in the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world, but Facebook says overall usage has dropped by roughly 50 million hours every day. That's major. Article that came out of Investment Watch blog basically confirming something that we've been saying before. Community internet is cheaper, faster, and better than going with the large ISPs. And there are towns that have already started setting up their own optical fiber networks as a community service, as a public utility. And that's exactly how the internet should be handled. Story coming out of the Register in Great Britain. Basically, there is a terror law expert, David Anderson, and he was doing a presentation before the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee talking about backdoors into encryption and computers, and he says, why do you need to bother? There is so much data that is sent in the clear. You can't even handle that. So here you have a terror law expert basically saying that backdoor encryption isn't really helping the problem at all. It just allows politicians to spy on other politicians, which I think has happened in this country. What am I saying? I mean, that's the whole FISA memo was to make it quasi-legal to spy on the Trump campaign. But I'll tell you right now, absolutely no doubt in my mind that Hillary and Obama were spying on Donald Trump using the intelligence agencies. None of it was legal. They didn't have a warrant. It's Watergate all over again, and that's an issue that we need to be pushing. This is the Democrats' version of Watergate. All right, we're going to take a turn now at Apple, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I actually like my Apple iPhone 7, and we got Claire the larger one. In hindsight, I wish I'd gotten that one as well, but it's a nice little phone. It's waterproof, reasonably drop-proof. And we're hearing all kinds of trouble about the iPhone 10. And we're hearing reports that Apple is already cutting back on manufacturing orders because they don't think it's going to sell. And in the latest version of the operating system upgrade, they've hit another snag. Apparently, some iPhone 10 users cannot answer incoming calls because the problem is the phone will ring, but it can take as long as 10 seconds or longer for the screen to turn on and light up and present the buttons to accept or reject a call. And after 10 seconds, the calls tend to go to voicemail. Now that is a major, major flaw. And you would think on a telephone handset that is costing roughly $1,000 that somebody would have tested the basic function of being able to make and receive telephone calls. Well, apparently somebody has found yet another way to get past the Amazon Key door lock. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, one of Amazon's latest offerings is that you have this lock on your home. And if you order something from Amazon, the Amazon delivery man shows up, unlocks your door with a one-time only access code, places the package inside, closes the door, and leaves. All of it captured on video to make sure that the Amazon delivery person is not doing something nasty. I would never have this, but some people apparently have. But it turned out that there's already been one hack discovered where Rhino Security Labs found a way to flood the camera with junk packets to stop it from recording. Now there's another hacker who has found out or figured out a way to basically leave the door unlocked after the delivery man leaves. And he doesn't even have to have access to the lock. He doesn't have to have access to the home internet. He just hides this little electronic gizmo near the door, and the delivery man comes up, he unlocks the door, puts the package inside, pulls the door closed. The hacker tool prevents the door from relocking and sends a message to the hacker that a delivery has been made at this house. So the hacker shows up, grabs the package or anything else he wants to get from the house, and recovers his electronic device, and he goes, okay, we got some people waiting on the phone lines now. So let's start with Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I was wondering if you learned anything from this Nunes memo. I haven't been able to listen to your show for a couple of days, and I just called in just because I was curious if you've heard anything, and did you learn anything?
There were a few small points in there I'd been unaware of, but overall, anybody who's been paying attention to Republic Broadcasting and what really happened, we had the large parts already figured out. What makes this memo significant is that we have now the United States government for the first time acknowledging that we on the independent media had the story pretty much correct. And there are apparently more memos to come. They're now saying that what came out in this first memo represents just 10% of all that they've discovered. And the word is out that the next memo to come on out is going to focus on the Department of Justice and their behavior in all of this.
Absolutely. Like I keep saying, everything that's in these memos we already know, and we can backwards engineer them. I'm curious about Trey Gowdy, him saying that this memo does not underline or does not undermine Mueller's investigation. I say let Mueller keep doing his investigation because ultimately it's going to be his downfall. And I was wondering if you agree with that too.
No, I think the sooner that we get this Mueller thing put away legally, we need to destroy its credibility. I think the better, because it's going to free up Donald Trump to maybe get back to keeping some of the promises he campaigned on. I have to disagree with Trey Gowdy. The fact of the matter is that, yes, this memo does, in fact, undermine the Mueller investigation. It invalidates the warrants they got, and basically everything that was acquired under those warrants is now inadmissible in a court of law. That includes a court of impeachment. And so Mueller's got nothing. Even if he had something before, it's gone.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Michael Flynn thing. Doesn't this fall under the fruits of the poisonous tree? I mean, shouldn't he go in and say, hey, I want to withdraw my plea? There's nothing here.
Well, unfortunately, he can't change his plea after the trial is over. He's just awaiting sentencing. But apparently, the sentencing is being delayed in the light of the developments that the initial warrants may have been invalid. What we're waiting to see happen is for the judge in the FISA court to basically come on out and say, I'm declaring the warrants invalid. They were based on fraudulent information. And once that happens, yeah, Michael Flynn may get to just take a walk, and Mueller's investigation may shut down. But Trump is going to have to handle this all very carefully, because no matter what he does, the Democrats and the corporate media are going to try and somehow twist it that it's proof of his guilt, that he colluded with Russia to steal the election away from poor, suffering Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, let's all cry. All roads are going to lead to the Clinton Foundation and Obama. And I think I called in the other day and told you that Obama had lawyered up and got a bunch of lawyers. This, I don't know if I think definitely rebellion and sedition. I don't know, treason, but man, these people need to go to jail. Honestly, I'm not going to say everybody in the FBI, but I think Trump needs to fire everybody in the FBI and clean out the Justice Department as well. Get these holdovers out.
I agree. I absolutely agree. These are career politicians. They've been there forever. They're very corrupt. Let's kick them all out. It's not like they're going to have trouble, finding work. They'll turn into university professors. And write books and all of that other stuff. It's not like their future is going to be in trouble. But yes, those upper echelons of Department of Justice and the FBI do need to be cleaned out. Both of those agencies are in dire need of an enema right now.
Now, I have one other point, and this is the main reason why I called in. Have you heard any credit card scams going around in the country lately? Because my dad just got a phone call and $1,500 was taken out of his account. We live in West Virginia, and whoever pulled it out is in Florida. So he's on his way to the bank right now to close his account, or not close his account, but change everything around. But I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. We just got hit Dad just got hit for $1,500, and I was wondering if anybody else is suffering from this.
I haven't seen anything today, but just as a general trend, there's a lot of fraud out there, and none of it is being prosecuted. Nobody's investigating it. We know that the phone system can actually track down people who are making these calls because there are two versions of caller ID. Now, the version that you see on the phone can be spoofed, and very often they do. There's a marketing company here that is spoofing phone numbers I know in order to get me to answer the call and listen to this pre-recorded message about a free trip to somewhere in the Caribbean. But there's a protected caller ID that is available only to law enforcement. That one cannot be spoofed and it cannot be hacked. But somebody's got to come up with the resources and say that all of these scammers need to be caught. But again, right now we have a government that is solely interested in war, more power, more wealth, more hot and cold running interns, and they're letting the country go to heck, including all of this fraud that's out there. And yeah, you got to be very, very careful. The scammers are very, very clever. You probably wouldn't hurt to have available security on your credit card bills. We have LifeLock, and we also don't use our credit cards a whole heck of a lot. And you know, we don't answer phone calls that we really don't know who they are anyway. So I'm sorry about what happened to your father. And did he give them a credit card number over the phone?
I have no idea. I know he just went recently, took a cruise down the Caribbean, but he just told me they did not stop in Florida. They flew from BWI all the way down to San Juan. So I don't know if it's been, what's the word I want, compromised in between that time. But that was over a month ago that they went.
Well, you do have to be careful. And again, if somebody calls you claiming to be from your bank or from your credit card company and they ask you for your credit card number, your response should be, aren't you looking at it right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, banks don't actually ask for that information over the phone or in email, and you should never, ever give it out. In fact, the less you use credit cards, probably the better, especially if the market's going to take a major dump. It's time to go back to cash and carry.
Yeah, that's kind of like he told me today. He's like, Kevin, the Dow's down another 1,200 points today, and I'm just looking at him because his 401k and his retirement's all tied up into the stock market. And I'm like, man, when this corrects itself, you're going to wish you listen to me and pull out now. You better take half and pull out now and invest into, I don't know, metals, silver, gold, copper, pewter, something. I mean, because I don't want to see him, the market tank and everything that he's worked for. Hell, he's what, 60-some years old. I don't want to see him take a haircut and take a major loss. But nobody listens to me. I mean, it's just, I try to warn people.
That's one of the most frustrating things of doing what I do, because I've been doing it for almost a quarter of a century. And you put out this stuff, Foster was murdered, this is going on, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, they're all brainwashed by TV and radio, and they're convinced everything is fine. Then the bad things happen, and especially in the last 2 years, I'm constantly getting emails from people saying, oh, you were right all along, I should have listened. And my response is, yeah, you should have. And I'm sorry that you didn't listen when it was possible to actually take some preventative or corrective action. But if there's a major market crash followed by a war, and even Claire is in here saying, if the market really is taking a major dump, that's going to accelerate the war agenda. And then maybe people will, snap awake. They'll take that red pill and say, oh my goodness, we're the most lied to people on the face of the earth. The government lies to us, the corporate media lies to us, and everybody who was out there trying to inform us with the truth, they were the good guys.
Absolutely. I mean, he trusts his financial broker. His broker is actually a senator, Serafini from Maryland.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, man, don't trust these people. That's what I'm trying to tell him. I'm like, I trust him a little bit, not as far as I could throw him. I think he's a great guy and everything. But learn to handle I keep telling Dad, learn to handle your own finances. Don't put it in somebody else's hands.
Yeah, I agree. If you don't understand the market, you shouldn't be in there anyway, because those brokers are there to make money for themselves. Anyway, listen, Kevin, we're going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break. I cannot believe this. Jimmy Kimmel is on Fox News saying talk show hosts are liberals because that requires a level of intelligence. One of these days, I'll tell you what my IQ was back when I still had most of my marbles here. All right, we're going to start with Cody in Texas. And Cody, I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind today?
I'm going to leave a however on the end of my statement. And the statement is the liberals didn't have a problem with signing off on $400 billion in unmarked bills going to Iran. However, they're throwing a fit about the little crumbs now that is coming out of our
taxes.
Deficit.
Okay. All right. Listen,
correct.
Cody, going to put you on hold. Going to take a break for commercials. We're going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Cody in Texas, and we're talking about the markets. And again, I'm keeping an eye on the futures for tomorrow. Apparently, a lot of people are saying, a lot of brokers who were on the floor are saying they've never seen anything like this. Apparently, what they're saying is going on. I know in the corporate media they're blaming it on inflation and rate increases, but apparently people on the floor are saying this is the start of the unwind of the biggest aggregate short volatility position the market has ever seen. So, Cody, what's your response?
Well, my however point was, at some point, the liberals may actually be right. I'm concerned that the downfall in the rest of the world market is they're looking at us, the U.S., as being insolvent, having to borrow $1 trillion just to meet our this year's budget, and it hasn't even been passed yet.
Well, the United States is insolvent. They're basically, the Federal Reserve is a legalized counterfeiting operation that has been propping up a government that cannot balance its books for 100 years. And everyone likes to say, well, yeah, the debt doesn't matter. It's just all a question of liquidity. But at some point, the rest of the world does turn away from using the U.S. currency because it's basically being inflated to worthlessness. Every time the rest of the world tries to move away from U.S. dollar hegemonic domination, the U.S. government will apply some form of pressure, political, some kind of arm twisting, economic, even war. That's what happened in Iraq and Libya, where they wanted to change the way they were doing business, and the U.S. just goes on in and kills the leadership and drops them back into that private central banking trap. Now they're doing the same thing down in Venezuela. They're trying to figure out a way they can destroy that cryptocurrency before it becomes a significant threat to the private central bankers' fiat currencies.
Well, my biggest concern when I saw that Trump was actually going to be our next president was that they were letting him in, I'm talking about the powers that be, to be the next scapegoat. In other words, the true Republicans and the true Democrats wouldn't have to hold this stinky stick. If the market did collapse, it would all be on Trump's shoulders. They would be able to blame him anyway, and no one that way would actually take the blame for it.
Well, it's a repeat of what happened with Herbert Hoover, who was popularly blamed for the Depression of the 1930s, but Herbert Hoover did not create that depression. It was created for him. And we need to remind everybody, Trump's only been in office for a year. You can't take a working market and wreck it in that short a time, even if you want to do it. The reason our market is hovering on the edge of a crash goes back several administrations, and we need to just keep pointing that out to people. Trump just drew the short straw. He got to be the boss when it finally came apart.
That's why I get just so upset in my stomach when I hear the liberals brag and say, well, this is actually the Obama economy. Well, in 8 years, he had nothing but stagnant economy and job growth and et cetera. But all of a sudden, in the 9th year, now he gets credit for it.
Well, now I got to let you go. We got to do a break for station identification, and we got more callers waiting after we come back from these words from our sponsors.
Mike.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to start taking phone calls from, let's start with Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
That one call you had a couple of calls back talking about his father getting ripped off. Well, what's going on here in South Florida, they're going to post box, and you can't even put your mail out because I've been waiting a year now for the Postal Service. They busted like 10 guys with a ring stealing mail out of the drive-through mailboxes and all over South Florida here. There's a bunch of them. They finally caught this ring, and I'm still waiting to get my money back, and it's a nightmare. They're literally taking a real sticky tape and putting it on a fishing line and pushing it in the mailbox, and it's pulling people's mail out. They're cashing checks and everything. It's unbelievable. You know, and the fraud here in South Florida for medical is unbelievable. And we're number one in the nation. But yeah, Michael, what I really want to talk about is just so that one guy knows, it's not only about credit cards. They're stealing mail and every other thing in this South Florida area.
Yes,
they're all over Latin America. It's a disaster. But here's what I want to talk about, Michael. There's two things. The first one is this This guy, Anthony Weiner, he's gone to jail for sexual problems, but he didn't go to jail for what was on his computer. How did he get that information? And you're talking about the stock market crashing. I believe the Zionists are behind the market. They're doing anything. The left-wing leaning Zionists are going to do anything they can to take down Trump, and they'll use the market as the tool to do it. And also is this, Weiner went to jail for sexual crimes, but he hasn't gone to jail for what he had secretly on his computer. And what was on that computer, and who was he sending it to, Israel? What was Weiner doing with that information, Michael?
Okay,
and
hang on.
The wife.
Tom, calm down.
Let's get to the point of this.
I'm going to get to the point of this. You need to understand that laptop had originally belonged to Huma Abedin, and they'd shared it, but then she got a newer laptop, and he just sort of took that one over. So there's no chain of evidence that Anthony Weiner had anything to do with Huma Abedin's documents that were left on the computer. Personally, if it had been me, I would have done a clean out. Format the hard drive or use an eraser or something like that. But Anthony Weiner was just using it to send his emails and pictures of himself to that underage girl. So that's why he is not being prosecuted for those Title 18 violations. Huma Abedin, on the other hand, should be prosecuted because she put this classified information outside a controlled, secure environment. So did Hillary Clinton. And I'm hoping that as we start ripping away the layers on the scandal, that we're going to see some prosecutions here.
Beautiful. Michael, another thing, the main thing I called you about is this. I'm wondering if you ever heard of a gentleman called Ted Hayes, and I'm wondering if you ever listened to Billy Cunningham, because I listened to his show last night. It was an amazing show. It was almost as good as yours, Michael.
Thank you.
And Billy Cunningham had this gentleman on called Ted Hayes. And this guy is exposing the media, exposing the whole Democratic Party and what these Democrats are actually doing. And he was talking about Los Angeles, the homelessness, and San Francisco. He was talking about slavery, how the blacks are the criminals that they are amongst each other, and the murders they commit amongst each other. And he was talking about what's going on in L.A. and all the homelessness, and how the Democrat Party and that Maxine Waters is behind all this nincompoop stuff. And I've never heard a show like that in my life, other than maybe your show with Billy Cunningham, nationally syndicated. Mm-hmm. And this guy, Ted Hayes, I was wondering, Michael, if you could get him on your show. I was wondering if you could do an interview with Ted Hayes on your show.
I'll certainly try and get him. I've heard the name and I've heard what he's talking about. But yeah, right now, if you look at
he's amazing.
The worst cities to live in this country, they're all run by Democratic Party machines. Taxes are high, violence in the streets, infrastructure being neglected, because they take all the money and they spend it on all this ridiculous stuff like forcing bakers to make wedding cakes for lesbians.
Well, Michael, according to what I was reading today on the, I think it was, I can't remember, it was Breitbart. I think it was Breitbart. There's 119,000 homeless in L.A. alone, in the city of L.A.
Yes.
Almost 120,000 homeless people all over that city. And that's not counting San Francisco, of course. But this guy, Ted Hayes, was right on the money, Michael. I wish you could archive Billy Cunningham's show from last night, because this guy, Ted Hayes, should be on your show telling your listening audience what the real truth is about what's going on with this Democratic Party. They're disgusting, they're despicable, and they're the real deplorables, is the Democrats. Not the Republicans, it's the Democrats who are the deplorable ones. And allowing this. Look at Detroit, Michael. Look, it looks like an atomic bomb blew up in that place.
Yes.
Now it's getting better a little bit. And you have this moron, Eminem. I remember he made a movie, 8 Mile, and he's on the bus, and beep, beep. And here, Eminem, why don't you look at your city you're making crap music for, and you look how blown out your city is, what used to be the richest city in the United States in the 1950s and 40s. I mean, it's unbelievable. Look at Chicago. Look at Philadelphia. Look at Baltimore, Michael. They're cesspools. And Donald Trump's right with what he said about Haiti and all those other countries in Africa. Donald Trump hit it right on the money. Who's kidding who here? It's right on the money. And no, Donald Trump's this. Donald Trump's racist. No, Donald Trump's telling the truth. And I guarantee you that it was the Zionists behind trying to take him down with this economic collapse. It ain't going to happen.
I disagree with that.
And you also have deep subversives like Harvard and all those other ones trying to take it down.
Tom, calm down. Calm down. Take a deep breath. I disagree with you that what is happening on the stock market is in any way intentional. Certainly because all of these power players are personally invested in the market. They don't want this stuff to happen. Congress doesn't want it to happen. They've got huge stock portfolios. The brokers have their own stock portfolios. This basically is something that economic experts have seen coming for quite some time, because the stock market has freed itself from regulation. And as a result, the brokers and the brokerages are playing these games to make the market look like it's better, to make it look more attractive to new investors coming on in. And in the process, they have basically recreated all the same mistakes that led to the crash of '29. And so I agree. I don't think anybody really wanted this. I mean, if somebody saw it coming, they can make a killing on short selling. But I think by and large, I don't agree that this is being taken down deliberately.
Michael, let me ask you this. How much money was sent to Iran under Obama? How many billions of dollars was sent on cargo planes to Iran? Do you know the figure on that?
I don't recall it off the top of my head, but we did the same thing to Iraq when we were done bombing that place. Just huge amounts of money that just vanished into thin air.
Let me ask you this then, Michael. How come it's such a big deal with these Democrats to get $25 billion for a southern border wall when you're giving these guys almost $800 billion and cash money, or taking cash over there? You can't give Donald Trump $25 billion and put a border wall to protect the whole country? Well, it's not this Mexican, this Iranian, this Chinese. Who knew? You don't know who's coming through that border.
Okay, Tom,
but you won't give the President of the United States what he wants.
Tom. The issue is not how much the wall costs. The issue is the Democrats want wide open borders so they can flood this country with illegal immigrants and refugees on the assurance they will all vote Democratic. And already we're hearing these stories about how these illegal immigrants and refugees are being flown to locations all across the country. They've even sent some out here. And my speculation, of course, is that these illegal immigrants and refugees are being sent to live in districts that currently are just slightly Republican, in order to load them up demographically and flip them into blue districts. I think that's what's going on. And that's why we have to have a national voter ID law before this November election.
Well, yeah, Michael, you're absolutely right. And we have to have this be before maybe the economy collapses. So what are you going to do when you have all these millions of illegals in here and the economy's collapsed? And it's such a bad situation where there's no money, the banks are all shut down. It's like 1929 again. And you got millions of more people that are dependent on a welfare state. I mean, come on, this is a total disaster.
Yeah, it is a disaster because if the economy really does completely collapse, supply chains are going to dry up, and we're going to have rioting in the streets, food riots. The illegals, I mean, they're already criminals. They're not going to hesitate to smash the front window of a supermarket and empty the shelves.
There you go. That's it. I couldn't have said it better. And like I said, Michael, I hope you get Ted Hayes on your show and let him give him like a 20-minute segment on your show and let him really discuss what's going on, because the guy's telling it. He's right on, spot on.
Okay.
That guy's spot on. That Ted Hayes. He's spot on. I hope you can archive Cunningham's show last night, because that guy was telling truths like I never heard, and I didn't realize what he was saying about slavery. And man, he had me. That was really heavy on the segment about slavery.
Okay,
and
Tom.
What's going on? And what's going on? And
Tom.
It was unbelievable.
Tom. Okay. I'm going to let you go now. Thank you very much for the phone call. We've had a caller who's waiting very patiently on the line, and I really want to get to him. So we're going to move over to Chris in St. Petersburg. Thank you for being so patient. And what is on your mind?
Well, first, Michael, I want to ask, what did you mean by there's a difference between spoofed caller ID and protected caller ID?
When a phone call is being made, there are actually two caller IDs that are being sent. The one that you see on your telephone is the public caller ID, and it can be spoofed very easily if you have the necessary equipment. The second one is an encrypted ID of the originating phone number, and it is available only to law enforcement with their special equipment. So the reality is that if there was actually a desire to track down these scammers, that it's actually possible to find out what is the real phone number that these calls are originating from. But I guess the scammers are just making lots of donations to members of Congress. So Congress just says, well, it's not that big a deal. We don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to believe the same thing, which is why I have not complained about the several spoofed calls I've received from card member services, even though I find online that in 2015 it says that the Federal Trade Commission on their own website and other websites shut them down.
Yes.
I'm getting several spoofed calls from my own exchange, from them. And by exchange, for those who don't know, that means the number that comes after the area code, and then the 3 digits are the exchange, and then the following 4 digits are the phone number. So it's from Indian sounding accents, and they claim to know your credit card interest rate and that they can lower it, but yet they ask for your credit card expiration and your card number, and then the customer service phone number on the back of the card. So in order to prevent them from scamming others, if you have the time, which often I do, I waste theirs. And this is how I do it. I use a card number generator for the expiration and the card number. You just Google Visa card number generator, MasterCard card number generator. They ask you which card has the greatest debt on it. They won't waste time if you don't have, say, less than $4,000, $5,000 in debt. And by the way, I use Record My Call, which is an app on my phone. I let them know I'm recording it just so I can understand their offer. And when they ask you to get your card, I ask, oh, okay, hold on a minute. Hold on. I claim that my brother-in-law's girlfriend is always using it, and she's waking up in the middle of the night and making charges she doesn't remember the next morning for items she doesn't even need, and forgetting where she puts the card. Has that ever happened to you? I just engage them in playful banter, and at most I've wasted 40 minutes of their time, after which they call me a fraud, and since they won't honor my request to not keep calling, and I let them know I'll keep wasting their time if they do. One fellow said, we're going to keep calling you. Oh, yes, we will keep calling you. So if anybody wants the recordings of my calls, they can reach me by email. If it would help them, maybe with the Federal Trade Commission, you can reach me at my email is Chris.
No, please. I'm sorry. Don't put your email out over the air. You're inviting a bunch of trouble.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay?
All right, not a problem.
It's against the rules here.
Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Yeah, the National Do Not Call Registry is a joke. Nobody is complying with it. And one of the ways that some of these telemarketers and scammers get around that is they'll actually have the calls originating outside the United States, where the U.S. government lacks jurisdiction to enforce the Do Not Call list. In fact, there's one marketing company that's headquartered right here in Honolulu, but their call center is in Guam. And so they just ignore the Do Not Call list. And after a while, you start wondering, do I really need a telephone at all? Because, obviously I like to call my wife, but I could do that on a set of walkie-talkies. And everything else that comes into my phone is somebody with a scam or an offer or something like this. All right, another phone call. Dennis in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, hey, Mike. I thought I heard you last week that there was some sea boxes loading or unloading at a port. I think said they were loading at a port in Florida that were owned by the Iranians. And I'm wondering who's loading those sea boxes to bring them into the United States? Are they coming from China? And is that how a lot of fentanyl is getting into this country, let alone possibly a lot of the heroin?
Well,
I don't know.
Possible, but the big stink about that cargo shipping port in Florida is it's turning out to be another deal like Uranium One, where it has now been leased to one of the top Iraqi scientists who, in the run-up to the war, was accused of being part of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction program. And so that's what the big stink is about that, because, again, the Clintons made a huge amount of money off the deal. A very critical piece of our American infrastructure is now in the hands of foreign interests. And we're seeing basically these elites, Obama, the Clintons, and so forth, they're acting like they own this country because they won the election, and they don't. And they're just selling it off piecemeal for a fast buck. And that was the big stink about that.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what happened up here when Mitch Daniels was our governor.
Yep.
Next thing we knew, our Indiana toll road up here went to sell and was sold for 99 years to another company. I think it was either Germany or Australia that bought it. Bought the rights to it and everything for I don't know how many millions, but they raised tax, they raised tolls on it and everything else. But I don't see anything, done with our roads to it that much to be
privatization.
Our roads are all going to be taken care of and all that.
Privatization is where the government will take assets that were built at taxpayer expense, then they'll turn around and sell them off to private ownership, and they'll take that money and they'll basically spend it on whatever they want to spend it on. And again,
yeah, right.
This is basically robbing the people.
Yeah, because I heard it went from they have a I-69, which is from Fort Wayne to to Indianapolis, and I heard what they did with that money is just take that 69 runner from Indianapolis down to southern Indiana, and they're supposed to go all the way down to Texas eventually. So that's what I heard about it. What happened to it?
Okay, well,
all right, Mike, I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dennis. We're going to let you go here and get on back to some of the news here. We're talking about computers. We're talking about computer security. Apparently, there is an unpatched flaw in WordPress websites that would allow the site to be taken down with a very simple denial of service attack. And it's been discovered in the WordPress content management system platform. And it would have basically, it's bad enough, it'll allow anyone to take down most WordPress websites even with a single machine without using a huge amount of bandwidth. So apparently this is still not patched, and WordPress people are having issues. I just want to see one of these hackers that hack ordinary people arrested and crucified live on national television. I know they go after the hackers that get into the corporations and the government, and they should, but have you noticed that double standard? If it's just us people who are being, hacked into and attacked, could care less. Now, apparently, there is a new botnet that has infected Windows machine. It's called the Small Minru Miner. It's infected at least 500,000 machines using the Eternal Blue exploit. This is something that leaked out of the NSA, and the hackers are now using it, and they're using these Windows servers to mine cryptocurrency. So thank you, NSA, for coming up with that one and then losing control of it. It has made our lives so much more interesting. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently during this morning's stock market roller coaster, volume got so high that some of these computerized day trading companies, their servers crashed. And apparently customers of robo-advisors Betterment and Wealthfront are furious that the servers shut down and locked them out of their stock portfolios. So there's a problem there. Let's take a phone call. Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Is it possible to hack a computer that would be part of the operation of a train or an Amtrak or its tracks? Does a computer have a part in the operation of these transportation
absolutely.
systems?
Absolutely. The trains themselves, managing the rail system, they have command centers that look like air traffic control centers. Only instead of planes in the air, it's trains on the rails, and where they are, there are sensors that are built into the rail lines to make sure that the trains are where they're supposed to be. These days, I imagine they probably use GPS as well as a backup. But the tracks are definitely wired with switches and optical sensors to keep the tracks, to keep the trains running so that they don't bump into each other or anything awkward like that with a high volume of traffic going on. That being said, yes, anything in theory can be hacked on into. What makes a system like railroad management or nuclear power, or just any power station, is that the computer system is not connected to the public internet, and that you do have it in a secure room, and you don't allow anybody to physically access the machine whom has not already been vetted for security. And that way, as you can see, we've had very, very few incidents where somebody actually is able to gain access to one of these computers that are mission critical and actually do any damage. So that's the answer to your question.
In theory, you say in theory it can be hacked into, but is not connected to any public. The public, well, I don't know that I understand that part of it. Well, in other words, someone in India or in another country, I don't mean to put down India, but any other country, they couldn't influence our systems here then.
No. Again, it's isolated. These machines, these mission critical machines, are not allowed to connect with the outside internet, and that includes the computers on Wall Street, various banks. They have their own little system, and it's very heavily protected.
Okay, I hope so. Just thought maybe there might be something there that's hasn't been talked about, so that's why I guess it's protected. If it can be protected, you think that you're comfortable with that? I guess I am.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, are you talking about the train wreck with the GOP lawmakers in it? Well, apparently, what happened there is this garbage truck was on that railroad crossing for long enough where a security helicopter spotted him and radioed the engineer of the train, who got the speed of the train down to just 70 miles per hour when they hit that truck. And as a result, only the front wheels of the locomotive came off the tracks. It's actually going to be a relatively easy fix. I learned a lot about this stuff when I was working at that railroad museum in Washington State. And had it been going at a much faster speed, then would have been a full derailment, and yes, then it would have been spectacular. Was it deliberate? I don't know. I understand some members of Congress, some of the people who were on that train are saying they don't think it was just a plain accident. And it certainly would have changed the Congress if a large number of GOP lawmakers were killed or injured seriously. And, of course, it certainly would have overshadowed the release of the FISA memo. Okay?
Yeah, the reason I feel, I'll make this quick, is the reason I feel uncomfortable about it is because they always say, we won't know anything for about a year, and then I don't ever remember hearing about it after that. So it sounds like they don't want us to know something, but then that's just
You're right. You're absolutely right. They'll say, let's not have any conspiracy theories. We're doing an investigation, and we'll tell you what's going on. And then a year, they'll release a formal report that doesn't get reported on by the corporate media. We went through that with TWA 800.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, you're welcome. We're going to let you go. Now, apparently, the House Intelligence Committee has, in fact, voted to send the Democratic rebuttal memo to the White House. And so Trump is going to look at it and probably tweet about it. And again, it's going to be very hard for him to not allow this out. And he's being set up. If he blocks it, if he vetoes it, then the Democrats and the corporate media are going to have a field day saying he's covering it up. He's covering things up. And apparently, let's see, something has gone wrong with our... Okay, something has gone wrong with our little communication system here. I'm not getting text messages anymore. All right, I'm going to try and fix this over the commercial break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take these phone calls, as you know, there is a big problem with the faking of friends and followers online, where you have celebrities and politicians out there saying, I have 15 gazillion people following my account and listening to my words. A lot of those are fake. And over in the Daily Mail, they wrote this article about how Twitter followers are vanishing by the millions from celebrity accounts as the government has opened a probe into social media black market for bots. And celebrities like singer Clay Aiken, Baroness Martha Lane Fox, reality TV star Lisa Rinna, British rowing Olympic champion James Cracknell, actor John Leguizamo were all exposed as having purchased fake followers by the millions, hundreds of thousands. Great British Bake Off judge Paul Hollywood went as far as to delete his Twitter account in shame after it was revealed that he bought roughly 600,000 of his Twitter followers. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Eric in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, aloha.
Aloha.
You hear me okay?
I hear you.
Okay, aloha. I inherited a house here in Tennessee, northeast Tennessee, that I would invite you and Claire to come live here, and I will give it to you for a year free.
Well, that is very generous of you, and it's not the housing that's the issue. It's the cost of getting from here to the mainland. When we moved out here, when I was doing Final Fantasy, the company paid for the move, and the bill came to about $8,000.
Yep.
Now to move back, I mean, there are certain things that we obviously we're going to leave the furniture behind and get all brand new and everything, but all the computer equipment, the production equipment, Claire's music equipment, Claire's harp, all of that stuff, we can't replace, and so we're going to have to take it. And the last estimate that we had out here was that's going to cost about $25,000, and so we're
$25,000. Okay.
What I'm hoping.
I'm happy to hear that. I might be able to help you because I inherited this house that's worth about $300,000.
Well, that's a very good thing to inherit. And the other issue, of course, is what I'd like to have happen, and it may happen now that we're starting to see this watershed moment where the government is acknowledging the independent media had the story right on what was going on with FISA. I'd like to see some, RBN to start getting the kind of money it deserves to have, and then RBN can pay for Claire and I to move to Texas, and basically I can use their studio to do the show and everything. Well, thank you, Eric. That's a very generous offer. I thank you very much for it, and we're going to switch over now to
I'll put it out there just in case it's a last resort,
All right, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we're trying to work on it. Actually, we've reached the point where we're starting to look for a newer car. And although with this morning's stock market stumble, we may have to hold back on that as well and just hang on to what little cash we have. So Eric, again, thank you very much. And we're going to switch to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. A commenter in the YouTube comments makes a very good point, but I know some of the details. His name is Mike as well, by the way, about how air-gapped computers could be compromised. I know neither one of these things is the exact means, but if you'll allow me to expound for a minute or two. First of all, North Country Radio used to sell a kit for what they called a current carrier transmitter, where you could plug it into the wall and it would use the wires in your house as data transmission cables.
Yes.
It was modulated at 300 kilohertz. Number two, if you remember, more than a decade ago, they tried broadband over power lines, but they had to ditch it because it was too noisy. It would swamp out, the RF noise would swamp out a ham radio at 100 yards.
Yes.
But with more than a decade to develop the technology, I bet you $1 there is a way to get into mission-critical computers via power lines.
Well, see, here's the problem, okay? In order to send and receive data over the power lines, and yes, they would use the neutral line, you have to have both ends of the system set up to transmit and receive data. And so...
well, maybe.
Yeah.
When you're talking about RF, when you're talking about transmitting RF over power lines, maybe. Also, if you recall, it's very primitive, but they used to use they used to vary the 60 cycle signal, the modulation of AC electricity to reset clocks and all the hardwired AC clocks in schools.
Well, they did it for everybody, for the home clocks to keep them running. And what it is every night at midnight, in order to not throw off things like the old cathode ray tube TVs would use that 60 hertz signal as part of their synchronization. At midnight, they'd basically throw some extra cycles or take some extra cycles off there to keep the clocks accurate.
Right.
And they still do it today, although most accurate timepieces are now working over the WWV transmitters, like my watch.
Right. All right. But I also had an idea how Trump could bring immigration to a standstill. You remember his executive order saying if you make a new regulation, you have to neutralize 2 of them, revoke 2 of them. Well, I don't think regulations are subject to judicial review, so they could just bog down the process of immigration with regulations to the point where it would be nearly impossible for anybody to immigrate, and then it wouldn't matter what judges did.
Well, it's not the legal immigrants who are the problem. It's the illegal immigrants, and so the regulations aren't going to have any impact on them.
Right. Well, it would make it more difficult. So, I mean,
how does more regulation make it more difficult for illegal immigrants who are ignoring the regulations to come to this country?
We could make amnesty nearly impossible.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
So there you go. But that's all I got for you. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. There's a lot of it out there. Apparently, over in Sweden, schools and trains have had to be canceled from the heavy snow. Now, over in Sweden, they're used to heavy winters, and this one has been exceptionally so. Over in Moscow, they just had the heaviest snowfall ever recorded in that city. Remember back in March of 2000, they were saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Nope, still getting snow. Story coming out of the Daily Mail, the carbon Nazis are out there trying to get funding. They want to build literally a sunshade to halt global warming. And apparently the United Nations has weighed in saying their plan is economically, socially, and institutionally infeasible. Apparently they wanted to put a chemical sunshade up there, something in orbit, some kind of spray that would reflect sunlight. We already have that. It's called clouds. Story out of Natural News. Apparently an economist, just to tell you the educational background that we're dealing with here, has come on out saying that the opioid crisis is caused by human-caused global warming and not the doctors and not the drug companies. They're good people. They're innocent. It's global warming that is making patients take more and more of those medications. Speaking of medications and illnesses, this flu is really getting out of control. Story out of the Daily Mail. Schools in flu mayhem as child death toll climbs. Campuses closed in 13 states to disinfect classrooms. Apparently in some school districts, 1/3 of the students are staying home. But of course, that's what they were told to do. At the first sign of illness, they are being kept at home. Story out of the Daily Mail again. Apparently this high schooler, soccer player, 16 years old, nothing wrong with him, perfectly fine, apparently came down with the flu, was prescribed Tamiflu to treat his influenza, and within 24 hours of starting the Tamiflu, he committed suicide. And the parents are convinced that the medication had something to do with it. And apparently Roche is saying that Tamiflu is not fatal, but there are apparently reports of children hallucinating or attempting suicide after being given this medication. But it makes money, and that makes it okay. And after all, it's only a few kids. You know, you guys are making such a big fuss over nothing, really. This is a very alarming story. This is coming out of Mercola.com, where apparently the FDA has released a draft document calling for homeopathic remedies to be treated the way regular prescription and over-the-counter medications are treated. In other words, oversight, regulation, safety testing. Now, this added regulatory burden is probably going to put a lot of homeopathic companies out of business. And it really is rather ridiculous because the vast majority of homeopathic medications are simply derived from plants. There's no manufacturing involved other than grinding things up and putting them in a caplet. There's no chemistry. There's no recombining of molecules. But right now, homeopathic products are close to a $3 billion a year industry. And the orthodox medical industrial complex apparently thinks that money ought to be theirs. Now, last week we were reporting on how the director of the CDC resigned, and the story back then was that she had invested in tobacco stocks, even though the CDC's mission is supposedly to end smoking in this country. It turns out there was, in fact, a little bit more to the story. Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald was investing in shares of vaccine maker Merck. And Merck makes a lot of the products that are promoted by the CDC. Very obvious, clear-cut conflict of interest. CDC promotes more vaccines. The director of the CDC makes more money. Now, Dr. Suzanne Humphries is famous for speaking out about vaccine injury. Apparently, she's receiving death threats. We know that a lot of homeopathic practitioners, challengers to vaccine orthodoxy, challenges to the cancer orthodoxy, seem to be dying under very strange circumstances. So they're out there protecting their products line. That's what it is. They're protecting the profits. Profits above all. Profits about the health of the patients. Profits above safety and efficacy. We've got the product out there. We've got to keep selling it. Well, maybe, maybe not. Over in the Philippines, they have a somewhat different attitude. Article out of the Activist Post. Their vaccine for dengue fever has been pulled out of usage over allegations it's connected to the deaths of 14 children. Apparently, they're using the anti-dengue vaccine Dengvaxia. And apparently, Sanofi, the drug maker, revealed that Dengvaxia might actually increase the risk of severe disease in people who had never been exposed to the virus. Now, this news created an uproar in the Philippines, where more than 800,000 school-aged children had been vaccinated with the drug in 2016 alone. They're just rushing this stuff out the door and selling it willy-nilly. It's amazing. Okay. California's war on off-grid independent homes. Apparently, people who are building homes off-grid out in the wilds and wilderness, California is now demolishing their homes and, by extension, making these people who wanted to build their own home away from civilization homeless. Now, ABC News is now reporting on the human trafficking crackdown. 510 people arrested, 56 rescued in California. So that's one of his promises that Donald Trump is keeping. And I think it's a really, really good thing because we're basically talking about people who are being trafficked for sexual purposes. Young girls, young boys, underage. And interesting that it's not getting more coverage, considering how sensational it is. But then remember how they shut down all reporting on the Franklin scandal. Apparently, a special agent with the Internal Revenue Service has been arrested on attempted sexual assault charges. And apparently it came from a police sting earlier this month. They were targeting potential sex offenders who had arranged sexual liaisons with people they thought were children that they found on social media. And among 5 men arrested was 44-year-old Kevin Millen of Ellington, who's an investigator with the Internal Revenue Service. Nice people over there. Remember D.B. Cooper? Big, huge mystery. Guy got on a plane, hijacked it, had a parachute, got his money, bailed out, never seen again. All kinds of shows about him. And apparently, they've identified the guy. He's this Vietnam veteran. And he's linked to the CIA. And let's see, I accidentally forgot to copy the guy's name on the story. Robert W. Rackstraw. That was his name. And looking at the photo, yeah, it's definitely him. It's definitely him. So the mystery's been solved. Now, here in Hawaii, there's a legal battle going on, and it sounds like a classic case of lawyers deciding they want to commandeer somebody's money just because they're old. And it's a big fight with Hawaii's last surviving princess. And I know this lady, we met during an event in Haleiwa some years ago. When we come back from these commercials, I will share the story with you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So I'm sharing a story that's local news around here, and it concerns a 91-year-old multimillionaire, Abigail Kawananakoa, and she's considered Hawaii's last surviving royal princess. And Claire and I met her several years ago at an event up in Haleiwa. And apparently her lawyer went to court to get himself declared her guardian and trustee, claiming that she'd had a stroke and she was incompetent. Now, Abigail says she's competent, and all of her family says she's competent, and she's fired the lawyer, but the lawyer is still in court. The fight is still going on over who's going to control Abigail's $215 million fortune. Now, Abigail has spent much of that fortune on some very good things here on the island. For the last 60 years, she's paid the electric bill for Iolani Palace, which doesn't get any funding from the state. And if you get here to Honolulu, you do need to visit Iolani Palace. It is the only royal residence on U.S. state soil. And she's funded a lot of other things, and she's done really good work. But the lawyer basically just seems to think that because she's 91 years old, that he can just take control of that fortune, which would give him a tremendous amount of power and influence on this island. And unfortunately, he did get the judge to agree. So I hope she prevails. But sometimes the arguments over some of the royal money can get very intense. There was this big stink some years ago where the Kamehameha schools were sued to allow non-Hawaiians to attend. They're superior schools. They're very good schools, better than Hawaii's state education system, and that goes back even before Common Core. But in the will of the Bishop Estate, it says this is a school for Native Hawaiian children, because at that time, the Native Hawaiian children were excluded from all educational opportunities. So they set up the Kamehameha schools for the Hawaiian kids. And they got a very good reputation. And these fights just go back and forth over the money here. And finally, again, apparently there's renewed interest in the death of actress Natalie Wood. Interestingly enough, The Great Race was on just yesterday that Natalie stars in. And they're focusing on Robert Wagner, which for those of us who've been around the industry is no surprise. But let's face it, Wagner got away with it. He's 81. He's had his life. He's got enough money where his lawyers can keep any prosecution of him on appeal until he dies of natural causes. So unfortunately, sadly, tragically, he got away with it. India is going to be landing a rover on the moon in April. They're sending an orbiter, a lander, and a surface probe to explore the lunar South Pole, where they're expecting they're going to find a lot of frozen ice water, which would make building a colony much more interesting. Finally, they had an 8-hour spacewalk on the International Space Station to install a new antenna. 8 hours later, they unfolded it. They had it pointed in the exact wrong direction. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please donate what you can. Keep us on the air. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.